Hello, hello. Wait. Yeah, time for a big one. Movies. Between moving to a city that has a lot more and better theaters, starting a relationship with someone who's really into movies, and being a lot closer now to a friend of mine who's really into movies, I saw a lot of movies. I saw way more movies in 2022 than in any year previous. I just followed the scene way more, was aware of all the hyped up releases, everything people were talking about. It was really nice. I've always enjoyed movies, of course, but I just kind of have a hard time motivating myself to go on my own or even watch things on my house alone. I don't know, it's just like somehow intimidating. But now the stars have kind of lined up for me to have like a big movie phase, and I wanted to celebrate that by making this movie. Movie? Video, whatever. I'm saying movie so much. We're gonna start with some stuff I didn't watch. I found that the more I got into movies, the more the gap between the movies I could watch and the movies I wanted to watch actually grew. So my overall satisfaction at the number of movies I've seen is perhaps lower than it was in the past, just because I'm more aware of what I was missing out on. So here are ones that I wanted to watch before I made this list because I thought they could easily be in contention for my favorites of the year. But I just didn't get a chance, and at a certain point I figured I gotta move on. I gotta make the list with what I've seen. I've seen plenty. I didn't see After Sun. I think this is maybe the one I would have liked most based on the reputation it has, the sort of acclaim it's getting, the type of movie it seems to be. It just seems totally up my alley, and I never watched it. I also didn't watch this, which I also think I would have really, really enjoyed. It just very much seems like my cup of tea. The comedic aspects, the Irish aspects. But no. This one I was super intrigued by because a friend of mine, a very close friend, watched it and said, yeah, you should really see this. I think you would kind of like relate to it. And then I was talking to another friend, my cousin actually. We were talking about this movie, and I said, oh yeah, a friend of mine said I would find it like really relatable. And my cousin said, that person hates you. And that made me want to watch it all the more. This one I think was probably on the highest of my two watch lists, but I just never found a chance, and I just decided, it's okay, I'll watch it later, it doesn't have to be on a list. This one I was really intrigued by, even though, I don't have any interest in like superhero movies. This one, it seemed to have like a really unique, compelling aesthetic, and it was like 3 hours, which is intriguing, and it has Robert Pattinson, who I love, but it just didn't happen. This I felt like I really ought to see, having liked Jordan Peele's other works, and, it just really seemed fun in the trailers and stuff, but nope, didn't see it. This my boyfriend saw and said it was like the most engaging, amazing theater experience he's ever had watching this in theaters. He saw it in like full IMAX 3D. I still want to go see it. It didn't make the cutoff for this list, I guess, but I'm sure it's going to be in theaters for like the entire 2023, so I am looking forward to that. I don't know, he described it to me for a while. He tried to explain the appeal, but the more he told me, the more I realized like this is something you just actually have to experience firsthand. So I am looking forward to that. This I wanted to see because I really enjoyed Whiplash. I actually saw Whiplash in theaters this year with a live band doing the score, which was just amazing. And it really reminded me how much I love that movie and how amazing that movie is. And I liked La La Land okay too. Not as much, but I thought it was just very well done and very engaging still. So I had every reason to think I would like this movie. I didn't even know it had come out. It kind of just like slipped under my notice, and then by the time I realized I kind of wanted to watch it, just didn't happen. This I want to watch because I like Noah Baumbach, I like Adam Driver, I like Greta Gerwig, I like the book. I read the book a long time ago in undergrad. Lots of reasons for me to think I would enjoy this a lot, but I just didn't get a chance. This is a horror movie that a lot of people gave very strong reviews for. I know a little bit about the premise, and what I do know sounds really, really intriguing. A friend of mine said this is an excellent example of a movie where the main character switches at some point, that you follow one character for an extended period of time, and then it like abruptly switches to having another character as the focus, and I love any movie that does that. The Fabelmans is the latest Steven Spielberg epic, and I don't know, at first I was like, this sounds really kind of cloying and saccharine and just uninteresting to me. I thought it would be just like this really nostalgic, eat your heart out with family love type movies, but the more I've learned about it, the more interesting it sounds, and just kind of this meta-analysis of Spielberg's career, making this semi-autobiographical film where he recreates the movies he made as a kid. That sounds really fun. That sounds just really interesting, and just little things that I got spoiled about, like some of the other actual famous Hollywood people that appear in kind of like caricature in the movie sounds really, really entertaining too. So again, hopefully I'll get to all of these at some point, but they did not make the time period, I guess, that I've arbitrarily chosen, just because I really wanted to make this video and move on to other things. Oh, and the menu. This also sounds like a lot of fun. Just the world of like high cuisine and gastronomy and stuff I find really entertaining, and this seems like a really thrilling satirical look at that from what I've heard. So, but I just kind of want to shout out some other movies I did watch that almost made the list. For a while I was thinking I would do a top 15, and it kind of hurt to cut it back down to top 10, but just getting unmanageable. Glass Onion. This is like my number 11, I guess. I wanted to include this mostly to like talk about it at length and defend it. So I saw this at TIFF at the premiere, and I had a blast. I thought it was awesome. I laughed so much. I was thoroughly entertained. It was so much fun. I was pretty shocked when it got a wider release, and there was like a lot of backlash to it. A lot of my friends didn't like it. A lot of people just call it straight up stupid. And it is pretty stupid. I think probably one of the big differences I had is that I actually watched this before Knives Out. So I didn't realize that Knives Out had a reputation for being like very tight, kind of intellectual, not stupid. I didn't realize. I thought they were all this kind of cartoony and goofy and over the top. So I guess my expectations were very different. But I don't know, I just found it very funny. Like, yes, the messaging and stuff is extremely unsubtle and beats you over the head with some pretty silly twists and stuff, but I just found it very cathartic. Like, it's one of those movies where just everything you want to see happens. And I thought they did it with a lot of really, really, really funny performances and just fun locales and set pieces and stuff. So, I don't know, I'm a lover. I'm not one of the haters. This was a movie we saw in kind of like its second run of theatrical release, not at TIFF. My boyfriend had been pretty hyped up for it, but we couldn't see the actual like premiere run at TIFF, but we made time for it later. Very impressive movie, very like thematically tight, all sorts of like twists and escalations and engagements. I found it like exhausting, but by the end, just so many things had happened that I was kind of like tired of my brain like trying to process each new twist and piece of information, but really compelling cinematography. They had all sorts of like fun with the really dramatic zooms, really dramatic perspective shots. Probably my favorite one is this excruciatingly long sequence where the main character is trying to text the female lead, and she keeps sending messages, so he has to like erase and retype and just these like long perspective shots of just his phone as he kind of like hesitantly types out some characters and erases them, and then the reverse shot of like looking up from the phone at his face. Really just a lot of fun there. We saw this at TIFF as well. Daniel Radcliffe doing like a parody biopic of Weird Al. It was so much fun. I really liked it. A few of the scenes had me really busting a gut in the theaters. I think the way they escalated it was just phenomenal, that they weren't content to kind of do beat by beat what a typical musician biodoc would look like, but instead just take it totally off the rails. I wanted to include this because like feels like not like me to not have at least one anime movie on this list. And I really, really enjoyed this too. But in the end, it kind of just felt like more like I was watching a season of anime. I talk about this in the anime reviews video, which should hopefully also come out very shortly. But It's tough to do like a real cinematic feeling for like a slice of life series, and I think this one handled it better than most, but by the end I was still wishing that it was just the third season of the anime instead of a movie. I think it just would have been a more complete paced experience. But yeah, very, very good. We saw this very recently, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and it was fantastic. The animation is some of the most insane sakuga I've ever seen out of like Western CG animation. Up there with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I think is like the only thing on that same tier that I've seen. Just like really fun, really kinetic, really intense. It moves at this like manic pace. Like every scene is just as short as possible to get across like the plot information and the character motivations and like a couple like beats and then you're just on to the next thing. And I don't know, I was like very compelled from start to finish. Lots of fun. Okay, let's start with the actual list. At number 10, we have The Northman. This is the latest work by David Eggers, who I consider a real genius operating today. Both of his previous feature-length films, The Witch, The Vivitch, and The Lighthouse, are just among my favorites of the kind of modern horror period. And here he brings us a real sincere epic in the purest form. We take this ancient pre-Shakespearean tragedy, the ancient story that inspired Shakespeare to write Hamlet. We see it involved through rite, ritual, sword, and sorcery. We get these beautiful, dizzying panoramas. I believe the whole movie was shot on location in Iceland and really takes advantage of this drone era of panoramic shots. Just beautiful, dizzying, rotating, panning around mountains and seeing just the epic journeys the characters are undertaking. The choreography is extremely brutal. There's some real centerpiece shots of just like Viking raids where the camera just kind of keeps rolling as it slowly pans through all these scenes of very kinetic violence happening around you. The performances are so unique in this movie. They're so dire, so severe, so deeply driven. Like they aren't really acting like humans much at all. Like there's no kind of sense of like trying to have a complete human being performance where you can see moments of comedy, moments of vulnerability, moments of confusion or whatever. Everybody is just like on this one-dimensional path forward to their destinies. It feels challenging. It feels like the film challenges you to enter this world with a very cold welcome, with a very uncompromising welcome. There's no compromise whatsoever. There's no comedic relief in this movie. There's not really any sense of like a B plot. It's just one man's Viking adventure. It feels in a lot of ways like an inverse of Eggers' other work. And this might kind of sound strange given that he only has 2 other movies. But I'd say kind of structurally and thematically, there's big overlaps between both of them that get hard inverted here. In both of those, we see isolated people terrorized by this incomprehensible externality, which in fact is really just internal forces being manifested as it's their internal struggles that manifest as this external terror. And here, our protagonist is this internality that appears as an externality terrorizing and isolated people. I don't want to get too much into the plot. I don't want to spoil anything. But it was really profound when I was watching it and I realized that if the movie just had been shot from a different perspective, if we had a different protagonist, this would be very similar to other Eggers' work. But instead, we are following the perspective of that terror, of that force of revenge. These cartwheels of empathy weave us around the trunk of the tree of fate, greater than all. It's really interesting to me because, they do kind of challenge you to think of these other perspectives, to think of how the enemies, how the antagonists are perceiving our hero, how they're unique, each individual's understanding of their fate and their destiny and what they need to do in order to continue living, conflict with each other. but that all of it just feels so meaningless. You're both compelled by the human action, but you understand its insignificance to the greater forces of fate. And some of the movie's most stirring moments are when he has these hallucinatory visions of his place in a long lineage of kings, of Viking royalty and future adventures and conquests, and he just realizes that all he has to do is kind of like play his part, play his small piece in this grand, overarching puzzle of fate. It's very powerful. I think this is something that I was thinking right after I first watched it, and the more I think about it, the truer it seems. That Eggers has managed to make a movie that if somehow through magic we were able to show actual Vikings living in that time period, they might approve of it. There's nothing undermining them here. There's nothing that refutes their ideals, their legacies, what they strove for. Assuming, of course, they understood English and they didn't just attack this enchanted screen. I think this is a movie that they would approve of, that they would think was a good time, and that's quite a feat, I think. All right, next we have the Donkey movie. EO! Donkey movie! It's the Donkey movie. Never before has a blank type movie has been as much of a blank type movie as EO is a donkey movie. Basically every single scene heavily features and is at least partially focalized through the perspective of our titular little buddy, EO the donkey. But our donkey, despite being in the spotlight, is but a donkey. His agency is very minimal. He can only wander around, and a couple times he delivers a big retributive kick. Actually, maybe only once. I think he only kicks somebody once, but he can do not that much. He is only a donkey. But he is so endearing. Rarely have I been so endeared to a character in any movie, let alone one that is totally mute and without, much agency in his own story. But he's so beautiful. His helplessness is so compelling. Just seeing his brave but confused little face in every shot just really makes your heart ache for him. You want to see him okay. But alas, he is dragged into a long, long chain of all too human vignettes. These are strange slices across society, some of them hilarious but often horrific, that unfold around his mute, confused face. So this unique structure, this movie is just filmed in such a bizarre way of no real connective tissue outside of this donkey who just stumbles from event to event. It's very hypnotic. You feel very disoriented, knowing just as much as EO about where he's going to end up next, understanding maybe just a little bit more about what's unfolding around him and what could happen. You begin to empathize more with EO than anyone else in the movie, right? Like, you see all of these bizarre situations where people are often in desperate situations and situations of conflict and sometimes very happy situations, but you start to just see all of their emotions and all of their actions as very alien, and you start to feel like the human world is more unreal than the donkey's world. The moments, these little vignettes themselves, are very sharp, they're very concise. I think they're all very impeccably shot and acted. You're just given just enough characterization, just enough setting to kind of understand what's going on, understand the dynamics of the characters. You'll see one kind of like crucial moment play out, and then it's kind of on to the next one. And at first I was like really trying to like codify these. I was trying to see some sort of greater arc representing, I don't know, like just archetypes of society or a journey from upper class to lower class, or each one will illustrate some shortcoming of modern life or something. But not really. They're so varied and they're so disjoint from each other that they really resist any sort of codification. And you're wondering, like, is there kind of like a complete thesis that all of these examples are trying to illustrate in some way or another? Or even individual theses for each of them? And it seems like sometimes you can start piecing stuff together. Sometimes it really feels like there's some greater point being made. But really, I feel like we're just left to kind of lament the relative incoherence of this human misery next to the simple life of the animals. This is one thing above all else. It's meant to give you empathy towards animals and to recognize all the ways that they're mistreated and taken advantage of and abused. And how little it gets us, how despite everyone's total mastery over EO, they're often the ones suffering, they're often the ones disoriented and confused, while our little guy just keeps trucking forward. Alright, next we have X. This one I saw with my boyfriend in anticipation of seeing Pearl, the secret surprise prequel spin-off movie in what is now looking like it's going to become one of the major modern horror franchises, I kind of hope. Because this was fantastic. It's this really loving send-up to both the 70s golden age of pornography. It follows a group of the producer and the star actresses and the cameraman and star actor as they go on location to a farm to film their porno movie. The 70s were an era where we're having kind of a budget and a conceit behind a porn movie, which may get shown in kind of like a fairly wide range of theaters, wasn't uncommon. This is why it's called the golden age of porn. And also the 70s golden age of slashers, when this genre was really starting to take root in the American psyche and a lot of the genre staples were being defined. Set, of course, right at the end of the 70s, as these things kind of got absorbed by culture, as they became mainstream, and as well their edge kind of gets dissolved. And a lot of this movie is kind of around the tension of, you know, is what we're doing going to stay amazing forever? Is it going to stay what people want to see forever? Is it going to stay so attention-grabbing and shocking and thrilling forever? I've never been a huge fan of like either of these movements, you know. I'm no connoisseur of this era of pornography, nor have I seen a ton of the slasher classics, although I have seen, you know, my fair share. But even with my like limited knowledge, I can really appreciate the love in this homage that they're really trying to highlight, you know, how much fun it was to make these sorts of movies, why people loved them so much, why they were so fresh and compelling and boundary breaking in this era. This movie features, I think, kind of my ideal of what I think of as like clever writing. And nowadays I feel like even just the word clever has been so appropriated and distorted in our post-Whedon quipcore world, where cleverness is just saying a totally throwaway line at an inappropriate time that indicates some sort of trope awareness or some sort of callback made just for the sake of it being a callback. No. Here, everything is just so, like, realistically motivated. That dialogue builds character not in a very artificial constructed way, but just in the way that people would naturally talk during scenes. And yet it still develops the character so well. And it does so in a way that both rewards and subverts our archetypal thinking, that we have certain assumptions for what each character is going to be like. And again, I think kind of modern cleverness is to completely 180 that and be like, whoa, you thought he was a nerd? Nah, he's cooler than you thought. But no, it's just sort of like minor subversions that keep you invested while still kind of reinforcing the archetypes that you're like excited to see. And then, after they've kind of established these character traits or these little backstories or preferences or whatever, they get paid off. And not in a way that's like overly showy, not in a way that like winks at the camera and says, hey, remember when they said this? But just in like subtle, satisfying ways that kind of make you feel rewarded for paying attention and being like, that's right, he did say such and such. This all sounds so basic, but like the bar is in the toilet. And nowadays I would prefer that movies don't even try to have these like little clever quips and allusions and stuff, but it's just done so well here. It's just such a nice, tight package of writing that I feel like I really got to explicitly call it out. And I think what's really cool is that even though these examples are kind of more like comedic or just like good character building, what happens is that it really builds your brain into this pattern recognition mode, where you start to anticipate that things are going to be paid off. And then this works in like the horror mode as well, that you start to get this dread that, you know, this thing that looks like a murder weapon, you start to have faith that, yes, this is going to be used in some sort of gruesome murder later. And I think unlocking that dread, that's like the real key that horror has. It's not just about the actual scare itself, the jump scare, the gore, whatever. It's about that dread, which can only be brought up if you have a certain faith in the movie. It's also way more thematically interesting than I ever would have guessed. There's big discussions in this movie between the characters that, again, just feel like very naturally, very motivated within what we know about those characters. And yet they really dive into some super interesting topics. Pornography versus art, jealousy and freedom, the moral core of America, the moral fiber that they're out there degrading, perhaps. All really fascinating, all delivered without any sort of like pretense, without ever feeling like they're talking to the camera, without ever feeling like any one of them is the spokesperson for the director, but just like really good character, intimate dialogue where you're genuinely fascinated to hear everyone's takes. So I've seen a lot of discourse on Twitter about this movie that are calling it kind of like age-ophobic, elder-phobic, whatever, because, you know, the main antagonists, the main killers, spoiler I guess, are this very old couple, and there's a lot of shots where kind of their wrinkled, elderly, liver-spotted bodies are definitely meant to be kind of like gross and creepy and scary, which sure, I think that's valid. You know, that's not nice to say that at a certain age your body becomes an object of terror. But I think, though, what makes it really compelling for me is that this fear is always focalized through Mia Goth plays two roles. In her younger role, she's really afraid of losing her desirability. She knows that her career hinges on the fact that people want to see her naked, and that someday not so many people are going to want to see her naked. And I think the fact that this is the villain, this is the terror that appears before her, is always really well situated in what she's afraid of, what she finds grotesque. And then, inversely, the intense envy that motivates her playing the elder role, playing Pearl, is really painfully compelling. Like, you really do feel bad for this woman who used to find herself beautiful, that used to find herself as the center of attention, that knew people desired her and wanted to be with her, and now feels isolated, now feels alone, feels unloved, feels grotesque. She sees herself in some ways in the same way that young Mia Goth sees her. And that's painful. That's very painfully compelling. You know, as I'm sure we all have our insecurities about how we look and if we're attractive, and it was just like right on the edge where even though it's grotesque and even though it's a horror movie and it's absurd, it was still kind of twinging those things for me. I found it really compelling. But of course, we can dive ever deeper, because, surprise, we're going to talk about Pearl too. And here I'm going to cheat. This is also at number 8. I'm going to put both of them together in one slot, because I think seeing both of them in 1 year, so we watched X in preparation of seeing the world premiere, no big deal, you know, world premiere of Pearl at TIFF, which was just an absolutely fantastic experience. We got merch, there was a Q&A, Mia Goth was up on stage, everybody was so into the movie, the audience reactions were like just so invigorating. And I think the experience of seeing both of them in the same year like this really adds to each of them, so I don't know, I think it's fair. I'll include them together. So this is the companion prequel to X. We saw it again, no big deal, just the world premiere at TIFF, hee. It blew me away. And X did not at all prepare me for how crazy this movie was going to get. Where X lovingly recrafted these porno movies, these slashers, Pearl instead is like a real subversion. It's taking the golden age of Hollywood type film, and it's not even just like, oh, but then it goes wrong. It starts wrong. I don't know. It starts in this like deeply unsettling, twisted place, and then it just gets wronger and wronger. The meshing and inverting of the setting of X was something that I was really excited to see. The way they shot these movies was really neat, that they just did it like back to back with much of the same cast, much of the same staff. Not actually much of the same cast, sorry, I misspoke. Just Mia Goth overlaps, but a lot of the same production staff and stuff. So the movies have, all the same locations and props, but of course dressed totally differently, shot totally differently. I think just being able to control the mood shift between the two movies was like really compelling. Especially having seen X just so recently before. I think what's amazing is like you see all this stuff that's like dilapidated in X. It's like run down in the many years since the time of Pearl. But then when you go back, you realize that it was like even worse back then when it was an active farm. It feels all the more oppressing now that it's like alive. It feels all the more scary. But honestly, though, like, I was so engrossed with this movie so quickly, so hypnotized, that even though this was one of the things I was, like, looking forward to going in, was kind of, like, seeing how the two movies mesh. Any kind of intertextual feeling, not just the X, but all of the movies it was, like, parodying and stuff, all the genre pastiches that I could, like, tell intellectually were happening, all of that just faded away in a much more overwhelming emotional feeling of dread. I think what really hits for me is this feeling of like a transcendental potential that like what I'm afraid of, I can't actually imagine the things that I'm really afraid of. Like the scenes like her audition, the long 8-minute long monologue that happens near the end, or the final frame of the movie. I don't want to elaborate too much here. I don't want to give spoilers, but all of those like hit me on this psychological level that I just was not prepared for at all. There feels like there's no limit to how the movie will stylistically bend itself to attack you. That they're not binding themselves with any conventions, any consideration for focus groups or people that would get turned off by such a thing. They're just maximally assuming that these things will work and taking them to the absolute limit to make you feel uncomfortable and unhappy and upset. So even if you can reckon with the violence and the suspense and the tragedy of it, and even if you can reckon with the feeling of dread you already have for future violence, for future tragedy, there's always this feeling of almost like cosmic potential that the very reality of the movie is going to like warp in a way that's something unimaginable and truly psychologically scarring is just going to like attack you. Like the monologue like echoed in my head for days afterwards. I just wasn't ready to hear that kind of conversation, to have to deal with those sorts of questions. And all of this is anchored around Mia Goth's just sickeningly good performance. She's like funny, she's charming, she's endearing. You want to root for her, but she's suffering. It's gut-wrenching. You cheer for her, but it's haunting, it's terrible. It's so many things. And to have this kind of like then baked into the character of X, who you then empathize with and understand so much better. Masterpiece. Great movie. I'm so excited for the third one, Maxine, which then follows after X, which was announced as a surprise at the end of the world premiere, which again, no big deal. We just attended. Hee. Honestly, though, I guess what makes this movie so special for me is that Pearl, she's just like me. She's just like me, for real. We both just want to get off the farm. Next we have Turning Red. Much different movie. But this one also just kind of feels like it was just made for me. For real. It's a big nostalgia romp that's synced up with my own childhood. The characters are roughly the same age I was when the movie was set in like 1999 or whatever. It's set in the city. No, I think it's set in 2001. But yeah, I was roughly the same age in 2001. It's set in the city in which I live. Hooray! The production is exactly what I want from animation. It's boundlessly imaginative, almost like in the style of Studio Shaft, with awesome character Sakuga, just showing so much emotion, so much expression, while also completely closing the gap between things that are being imagined and things appearing on screen. It's this righteously shameless celebration of girl culture, this awkward jumble of vectors of desire. It doesn't shy away at all from the awkwardness of it, of the embarrassment, the confusion, the cringe, and yet it celebrates all of it in a way that's really endearing and really uplifting. And you might think, okay, Kista, I've been watching this channel long enough. I know about your complexes. I know about the things that make you upset. Seeing a bunch of young girls enjoying a childhood in an urban city, isn't that kind of painful for you, a rural trans kid that openly resents the fact that she had to grow up in the middle of nowhere and not have any of these experiences? It does sound painful. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked that when I watched this movie, it wasn't painful for me. But instead, it was like the opposite. Instead, it filled me with this feeling of, I made it. I'm in here now. This is now me. This wasn't the childhood I had, but this is the place I live in now. And this is the future I want to have. The future I want to have? The future I want to have is not being like a 12-year-old, to be clear. Nor is it turning into a giant red panda, to be clear. But it just gave me this sense of like, this is a movie that now inhabits the same world as me, that I've made it to, that, I don't know, it was just a really, really good feeling. All the fun, funny, action-packed emotional gambit that I love from Pixar. It's been a while since a Pixar movie hit this good for me. I think this is my favorite since Inside Out. This is like top 5 Pixar overall for sure. It's so excited to see their production get more experimental, more stylistically varied, taking more jumps into imaginative space or exaggerating off model or doing all this sort of stuff that just kind of, again, bridges the gap between what is kind of being imagined, what is being felt emotionally, and what is being depicted on screen. Between this and Spider-Verse and Puss in Boots and stuff, it feels like Western CG is like really having a level up moment where all these studios, DreamWorks, Sony, Pixar, are challenging each other and saying, can't you make something this interesting? Can't you make something that's this visually cool? The characters are really lovable, the setting is richly detailed, the plot is a great mix of down-to-earth drama and mystical lore. The music, especially the boy band that they're all obsessed with, is way too catchy. What really hit for me, though, and this is maybe going to be a theme throughout these movies we discuss, is the mommy issues. Just the scenes where she really starts to empathize with what kind of kid her mom must have been. How was her mom at her age? And using that to bridge to understanding her mom as an adult. That always cuts like really deep for me. Okay. Next we have the latest David Cronenberg masterpiece, Crimes of the Future. This movie is made for somebody, for real, for real. It's a wholly alien vision of the far future. Imagination stretching and snapping beyond any simple exaggeration, any utopian transcendence, any dystopian hellscape, any radical externality. I could start ranting about this forever, and I already talked about it at length in my review of Richard Dawson's The Ruby Chord. But people are so dang unimaginative when they think of the future. It's basically either like hyper-capitalist, it's the same as now, but the phone is smaller, and the screen, the TV is bigger, and the car flies. Some utopian Star Trek type thing, which is my favorite, but it's been done a billion times now. Some dystopian hellscape, authoritative control, or just cyberpunk anarchy insanity, or some radical externality happens, oh, there's aliens now. it feels like almost anything can be slotted into one of those four categories, and seeing like a truly imaginative vision that dares to say the future is just going to be really, really, really weird, and it's going to be about as weird for us now as thinking about what the lives of like a medieval peasant is to us. You know, it's that alien, it's that different. But despite it being so challengingly foreign, this movie always feels like very real, like psychologically and conceptually, and in terms of consistency of how different things would be in this hypothetical future. It all feels like very coherent and very connected. The characters still feel like real people, even though we have such a hard time understanding what the heck they're actually doing. So there's, hopefully this isn't too much spoilers, but there's basic premises about the future that sickness and pain have been evolved past, that the human body has evolved to no longer get infected, no longer experience sensations of pain. And then from there, it explores all sorts of very fascinating consequences that, again, feel like very realistic and consistent that these sorts of things would emerge. And there's no money. This is something that I was really thrilled by once I realized. I think maybe about a third of the way through the movie, I realized that no one has ever mentioned money or any sort of like transactional compensation ever, or any sort of currency or anything. And I was like so thrilled, and I was like, could they go through the whole movie without ever mentioning money? And they did. There's no money in the future. Yes, like the Ruby Chord, like Richard Dawson's new album, we're immersed in a future as distant as the past, reducing the comprehensible chrono range, that is, the time span that we presently can actually make sense of, down to just a blip around the present. It's humbling, it's haunting, it's awe-inspiring. Everyone has really funny names, too, in the future. It's Timlin, Caprice, Burst, Odile, Whippet. Many, many more. Everybody has a funny name. In all of this bizarreness, in the shadows of this unknown future, it's a really solid noir thriller that actually drives the plot. There's these intriguing, really unexplained scenes that, once you get a little bit more context, bloom into these really profound mysteries. And then, of course, you know, like, they do a really satisfying job of giving you answers by the end, of making you understand the significance of everything you've seen. Complex webs of secret loyalty, severed by secret betrayal, buzzing with secret motives. All the stuff that you would enjoy in your classic 1920s detective thriller. Still playing out here. Still playing out in the bizarre crimes of the future. All of it, of course, delivered through Cronenberg's specialty, the very grotesque cinematography. In terms of body horror, despite the fact that this has tons of like surgery scenes, it's not that bad. It's definitely Cronenberg trying to kind of show you the beauty of body horror, doing it in a way that feels very aesthetically satisfying, instead of just gross, instead of feeling like dirty and off-putting and disgusting. And very quickly, you feel like the cinematography is encouraging you not just to marvel at this alien future world, but to look beyond, to investigate, to think about what's in the shadows, what's left unsaid. So I find that that's like a really compelling way to immerse yourself in a setting that's otherwise so alien. All of this to very pointedly and deliberately say something. Everything in this movie is anchored in ethical dilemmas of characters debating the morality and the feasibility and, you know, just whether certain things happening are good or not. And yet, we really can't weigh in. we are so disjoint from this world that maybe we can kind of find the characters' reasoning to be emotionally compelling. We can get caught up in their cause and their motivation. But in the end, it's just like asking questions that we can't answer, that we can't say, is growing good new organs good or bad? is displaying surgical operations as performance art good or bad? How can we begin to answer that? and I think that just makes it such a movie of pure intrigue. That it's just the feeling of being asked these questions and not having the answers. All right, next at number 5, we have Joanna Hogg's The Eternal Daughter. This is another one we saw at TIFF. Welcome to a world of languid tension, cold comfort, stark luxury, and bitter warmth. From this simmering concoction of contradictions and considerations emerges something that may be all too familiar as the family relationship. This is a very unrelenting relationship between mother and daughter. So intimately personal, so loaded with tiny little affects and details that you know that it must have sprung from Joanna Hogg's real life. There's certainly a very autobiographical element. The main character is a filmmaker who goes on this trip with her mother as research and preparation for the next film she's writing. It's an intimacy that emerges from that you know you're kind of watching like almost like a diary film or like a hypothetical diary film, that really makes it all the more compelling, that makes it kind of like grip you in a unique way, that you start to empathize with the unseen director as well. Portrayed with such restraint, such fragility, such yearning to take one necessary but impossible step. An amazing double performance from Tilda Swinton. It's kind of the gimmick of the movie that she plays both herself and her mother. And you might think that sort of contrivance would make shooting it really, really hard. And it was. Actually, I even asked the director. Because I said so much of the dialogue feels like really natural, and the performances are full with all the natural, idiosyncrasies of speech. How could you get that sort of performance when the necessary artifice is that half the time Tilda Swinton is talking to herself, and the other time she's listening to herself? and the director said it very interesting that she would sit down with Tilda and they would just kind of like role play the different roles and improvise and just kind of talk through these conversations with the two of them, kind of alternating roles at times. And then that would give them the sense of what they wanted to come out in the actual filming. So quite a process, an intimate, involved process, one that you can really see how it led to such performances of depth. Cinematography is very tense. Every noise is so amplified. Every gesture feels so gigantic. It feels like it was guided by a sensibility of horror, of dread. There is a lot of like very creepy, unsettling shots where she's just moving around in these dark hallways in this huge hotel. It feels like it's just kind of spiraling fractally, that there's always other places to look, other places to check. It's very unsettling. It kind of puts you on edge. And then there's certain major moments that have cast very long shadows before them that you can tell it's building up to a certain scene, a certain discussion, a certain admittance to oneself. But when you get there, there's the shock is somehow almost increased because of that long period of anticipation that didn't really do anything to ready you, but instead just kind of made you more vulnerable. Basically, this is the Shining by girls for girls. The point of everything, though, isn't really meant to scare you or even haunt you, I would say. These long-awaited shocks are accompanied by a long-awaited catharsis of an exhalation, of knowing that this tension is finally passing, as painful as it may be. And throughout this, you have this long meditation, both explicitly by the characters, but then also in this almost like ritual act of filming the movie, of seeing these scenes, of these long shots of just the scenery. You feel like you're meditating on these themes of love, of creation, of loss, of memory. It never feels trite. It never feels cliche. There's no just kind of simple affirmations or easy fixes or instant revelations. It's never prescriptive. it just sort of opens you up to actually living with these ideas of living with these big questions and challenges to yourself in a way that really is deeply moving. And it gives me some sense of confidence that someday I can address the real scary things in life, like death, like having memories so painful that they never go away, like living onwards with the presence of death. These real inevitabilities that are always walking slowly towards you. It gives you some sense of peace around them, that this sort of meditative thinking will get you through it. Beautiful movie. Really makes me want to go back and watch a lot of other Joanna Hogg stuff. Alright, time for something completely different. Probably the two most different movies on this list. Now we are talking about the blockbuster Bollywood epic, RRR. I've never been one to watch, many of these big budget Hollywood action movies. Certainly not in the Marvel era, I just don't care. And even before that, I haven't seen Top Gun or Mission Impossible or some non-Tom Cruise ones too, I'm sure. And it's not even so much that I think I would actually dislike them that much. I probably wouldn't like them that much either, but I can appreciate a good action scene. I can appreciate action choreography and stunts and stuff. But it's like, I just couldn't get behind the idea of watching something that's so much just the American propaganda trough, I couldn't get behind myself just bathing my brain in that sort of messaging for an hour and a half. But now I don't have to. Now instead I can dive eagerly into the Indian propaganda trough for 3 hours. and it's vastly superior, this propaganda trough. Because unlike the American ones, which are just goddamn, the military is so cool and support the troops and all of this other stuff that nauseates me, instead you just get to see thousands of British colonizers get brutally massacred by armed revolutionaries. I don't think I've ever been so deeply satisfied by a movie. Every single set piece, from basic premises of these things are gonna explode, or this person's chasing this person, or we gotta kill all these people, or whatever, all of them just grow and explode, sometimes literally, in such sublime, addictive, kinetic reverie, hitting the absolute maximum of everything it could be. Nothing is left undone. All ideas are taken to 100% of their logical conclusions, sometimes very illogical conclusions. I've watched several sections many times, just because they're just so fun. And the big dance scene, which is the highlight for many, I'm sure, I've seen more times than I can count now. I don't know, it's just so cathartic, it's just so satisfying. The song is so catchy, the dance moves are just so invigorating. I many times now I've just put it on and just kind of smiled. Whether it's a song or a chase or a fight or a flashback or a friendship montage. This movie has the greatest friendship montage I've ever seen. All of these things taken to such extremes and then perfectly spaced out, perfectly timed by some really tragic character arcs. Just really understanding our characters' motivations and the depths of the wrongs committed to them. Conferring and becoming all the more resolute in their goals. It builds the same feverish desire in the audience for their retribution, and just knowing that those huge action sequences that will make good for all of their suffering will come. It's rewarded in full, again and again, more powerfully than you can ever imagine. I don't know. What can I say? I don't really have all that much to say about this one. There's no profound take. There's no thematic message that I feel like I've unlocked. It kicks ass. It kicks ass forever. Death to Britain. Watching this in Spain with one of my closest friends, who I really don't see that often, who we managed to have this trip to Spain together this year. Drinking beer, eating this big plate of charcuterie that we'd made up. Man, it doesn't get much better than that. It's so good. he had watched it with another friend like just a week earlier, and he was like, "You got to see this." And I was just so glad, dude. It's so good, man. It's just so good. I remember seeing one tweet that was like, "Man, if you thought I was hard on like American blockbusters before, now that I've seen this." God, it's just, man, I think this has more entertainment than every single Marvel movie put together. Even if there was like a 3-hour super cut of just the best moments of the entire Marvel enterprise, it wouldn't come close to standing up to this. My God, this movie is so fun. Okay, moving on to something else crazy, explosive, fun. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. This is an A24 produced wacky martial arts movie in the style of Stephen Chow with some weird sci-fi silliness, and then all of it anchored around like a pretty uncomfortable family drama. How did this become one of the biggest movies of the year? Potentially the Best Picture Oscar winner? It's not something I ever would have expected on paper. But kind of thinking about it and thinking about how people related to it and the kind of audiences it's been hitting, it's actually not that surprising in retrospect. It just feels sort of miraculous. For something that I liked so much, for something that I really, truly, unequivocally loved, to end up so popular, to end up on so many lists by a whole gambit of people from like very serious art film type watching movie critics to casual movie fans of all imaginations to people that otherwise would maybe only see Marvel movies or see like no movies at all. Like, it just seems like such a wide collection of people just loved this, and it's nice and refreshing to be part of that group for once and be like, yeah, I agree. This is great. Where do I start even piling on to all the superlative plays this has already got? And I do mean superlative. Let's be real. This movie's great, okay? I do love it. I put it at number 3 for the year. But I'm seeing a lot of people that are like, this is the best movie of all time? Huh? People saying like, this is a once-in-a-decade type of movie? Huh? It's definitely getting like really, everybody's just kind of like gassing each other up, I think, and there's so many things that are like so shocking and new for so many of these audiences that otherwise wouldn't see anything that has like 1/50th of the spice this has. And now it's like got such acclaims as, you know, number 1 rated movie on Letterboxd, I think, and it could very well win a whole bunch of Oscars. And part of me is like, yeah, that's great. Like, I'd much rather that happen with a movie I love this much than just some random trash. Like, I don't know. What was the highest ranked movie on Letterboxd before this? Probably like Schindler's List or something. That's not trash. Obviously, that's not trash. But I don't know. What am I even trying to say here? It's just crazy. It's just actually crazy how big this movie got. Anyways, what can I even say about it? A lot of people love this movie for a whole lot of different reasons. For me, though, I think maybe there wasn't any one point that resonated with me as deeply as certain things resonated with other people. Like, there's certain scenes and lines that I've seen quoted in GIFs like a gajillion times, and I didn't have that strong a reaction, but like, every single little thing this movie did, I enjoyed. Every little choice it made, I was very happy with. The exaggerated, whimsical cinematography almost sneaking around these well-realized settings. There's something just so lively about the camera work in it. It's just so fun. Like, it feels like the camera is a character, that the audience is a character that's also jumping around and also sneaking and popping in and out. And the achingly endearing but so absurdly exaggerated performances of every character. This really hit a sweet spot for me, that everyone is just such an over-the-top parody of that kind of character archetype, and yet they're all so endearing. Like, I just came away loving them all so much and just hoping for their absolute best. And I think the ability to make characters that are so exaggerated and can do such wacky things and operate in such a wacky premise and then still be able to scale it back occasionally and have these like very small, like intimate moments, have these like very down to earth, relatable moments, and to still like connect with the characters, to still feel like they're real. I don't know. So good, so good. Our family, but something bad happens arcs. This I said to my friend before was my favorite genre. Family, but something bad happens. And basically every character has their own little bad thing happens arcs. Builds this very nuanced, very subtle message where you're taking kind of the challenges of what it means to love, to accept the flaws of one another, how sometimes you just feel so deadened by apathy, by the tedium of life, by your own failures to live out your dreams. And, you know, if you've got all that and it's so hard to even love the people closest to you, what the heck are you supposed to do? It's the sort of message that I'm typically used to seeing, like, woven so subtly and deeply through like the narrative of like Ozu or something, where, you know, the children struggle to love their parents while being disappointed with the lives they've failed to make for themselves. But they take this very nuanced message and just literally like beat you over the head with it. And just that contrast of like tackling such difficult interpersonal stuff and resolving it through the most over the top, like unsubtle, like taking these complex ideas and giving them like cartoonish avatars. Hell yeah. It's just so fun. Like, it's just, and it's not like smarmy about it either. Like, it's not winking at the camera and highlighting the fact that it's being unsubtle. Like, it there's only one layer. There's no second ironic detachment that is poking fun at itself. It's just sincerely this over the top and very sincerely trying to teach you this very important message. Of course, what really stood out for me, which made this movie so much fun for me, was the production. It's just this endless audiovisual barrage of parodies, of styles, of just complete nonsense at times. It's like a real Shaft-style direct connection between the animation and the visual. This is something, of course, that I'm always praising in animation, that to me really defines what is great about anime as like a medium, the sort of thing that is consistent among like a lot of my very favorite anime. But here I was so impressed that they went for this sort of style IRL, like trying to think of the challenges in shooting sequences that were like 3 seconds long, but they still had to do costuming and location and mise-en-scene and blocking and have a whole camera crew and a whole lighting crew and a whole sound crew set up and assembled to shoot like a 3-second scene of them fighting as prisoners in jail or something, right? Like, it almost reminded me of 30 Rock, which is my favorite sitcom, in large part because of its eagerness and joy in just wasting money like that. And it just, I don't know, like, it really speaks to like a strength of vision that at no point did they doubt themselves and go, okay, well, is this scene really necessary? But just gave us everything everywhere, all at once. And of course, all of this is bound together by the main mode in which the movie operates, which is this kung fu choreography. Very goofy, very wacky, but still like very stylized, very impressive, very athletic, just amazing work from Michelle Yeoh especially. It gave me the same giddy feeling as when I was a kid and I first saw Kung Fu Hustle. That, I mean, I had seen like Jackie Chan movies before, you know, I'd seen The Drunken Master. I understood that there was this intersection between comedy and martial arts that could be very, very entertaining. But with Kung Fu Hustle and just this kind of extra layer of cartoonishness just blew me away. I can remember just sitting in the theater seeing Kung Fu Hustle at probably like 13 or 14 and thinking, I have never seen anything like this before. And that same feeling reemerged, bubbled up again here, which was very special. With this huge success, I feel a little more hope for mainstream media. I don't know, it's like a mixed feeling, because as I said, a lot of the praise for this movie is just getting insane. Best movie ever. Come on. But it's exciting, because I feel like if this leads to a wave of really crazy mid-budget movies that try to do like 8 different genres, and try to swing as hard for the fences as this one did, that'll be interesting. That'll be more interesting than a lot of the other stuff we would have gotten instead. So many eyes were open to so many things with this blowing up, and I really hope they stay open. I hope this makes people seek out Michelle Yeoh movies. I hope this makes people seek out Stephen Chow's filmography. I hope they think and understand that this movie was built on the back of so many dozens of other great movies that they would also enjoy so much. And I hope it stays open to seek out other fringer movies like this and to give them the attention they deserve and to turn them into phenomena again, even if it might be a bit annoying. It's so much better than the alternative. All right, moving on into the top 2. We're over the hour mark. Thank you for sticking with me. I'm having a lot of fun. I hope anybody watching at home is too. I don't know if you can predict the remaining ones. Probably this one, a lot of people who understand my taste in movies would have seen coming. This is The Triangle of Sadness. I had a huge love for the director's previous work. His previous 2 movies I had seen and really, really enjoyed, Force Majeure and The Square. And this one specifically seemed like it was kind of operating in the same mode of The Square. So my hype for it was absolutely gigantic. This is another one we saw at TIFF before the widespread release. And it lived up to everything I wanted from just more of what I liked in The Square. More excruciatingly cringe interactions between people, somehow both vapid and compelling. The more vapid the scene, the more compelled you are to understand how such a human really exists and operates. And just seeing how these like facsimiles of human beings that are so fine-tuned to a particular lifestyle interact with each other. Just this like clashingly artificial... Ooh, it's just nuts. And I could talk for hours about how much I love cringe comedy or even cringe tragedy and drama. It just speaks to something so affirming within myself that I'm always aching to tell the characters what they ought to do. I always feel so confident that I would be able to gracefully navigate this situation. And whether or not that confidence is misplaced is not really the point. It just sort of triggers this sort of like neurotic, extroverted part of myself that's like, I can handle it. I understand humanity. In seeing this train wreck, I understand humanity. More immaculate, glamorous, transfixing cinematography, vicariously devouring luxury. Much of this movie takes place on a super bougie yacht. And you kind of get to savor the decadence while also having just enough distance to understand how plastic and hollow everything you're seeing is. More scathing but absurd satire from the inside out, both deeply, deeply understanding the type of people he's satirizing, but still condemning them, still not letting them off the hook. No sense of kids' gloves or patting on the back and saying, hey, you're all right. But just sort of being like, we are all entrenched in this garbage fire that is late-stage capitalism. And you more than most, but me also more than most. And here we are together. More almost offensively like slap-in-your-face type twists and teardowns of expectations. Such major anti-climaxes and surprise climaxes and subversions of even things like where you think the movie is going to end. it feels again almost like insulting that it's kind of calling you like stupid for thinking it would go one way or the other, or a character would behave in a stupid way or whatever. All of this that I love from the Square that's here as well, but it's huger, it's vaster, bigger personalities, bigger escalations, bigger crises, bigger cringings. This movie hits me in 3 modes simultaneously. And there's other movies that kind of hit me in these ways that I really enjoy too. But this guy's work, this movie especially, hits me hard. At first I'm like very dizzied. I'm just hypnotized by these like excellent performances, by this luxurious fantasy world that the rich live in, these really impressive shots, dynamic shots, static shots, lots of very long sequences that just deeply immerse you into a moment. It's entrancing. I just feel so entranced by it. And then I feel stretched that there's some part of me that starts to get kind of like pulled to some tension by these excruciating interactions, by the very neurotic minutia of socializing. And this movie has a lot of scenes of like observed socializing, where we're watching some characters watch some other characters, and then there's this kind of like double reflection type thing where you're seeing how they're being perceived by someone else, but you're also of course perceiving them. And it just starts to take some sort of like neurotic engine in my mind that's like analyzing and comprehending these situations and understanding what I would do, and it just like makes it run faster and faster and faster such that when I hit that kind of like snapping point where the situation breaks, where maybe the punchline happens, where the tension suddenly gets cleared, this catharsis just rushes in, and I laugh so hard. These movies are so funny for me. I can't remember many times I've laughed this hard in a theater, and especially not in a theater that is otherwise relatively quiet. I think there was quite a few scenes where I was the only one laughing. and I don't know, like, obviously there is a lot of parts of this movie that are meant to be comedic, and a lot of parts where everybody was laughing, but like, just like little things, like scenes of couples arguing, I would just get like hysterical. Like, I don't know, it's definitely something wrong with my brain, but it's something that's wrong with my brain that allows me to enjoy this movie so much, so I'm not complaining. Beyond laughing, there's just this overall bubbling, giddy tension I have constantly throughout movies like this. The other ones I get it really a lot in is Safdie movies. I think Uncut Gems certainly hits me in these same 3 ways. But even like Good Time, all these like super tense movies, I just get giddy. I just get so excited. And it's like my brain has activated all the neuroses cylinders without activating any of the anxiety cylinders, such that I'm like fully engaged for like some sort of conversational threat that I have to navigate, but I feel none of the stress, none of the cortisol. I know it's a movie. I'm just excited and happy. Even rewatching parts of this now to make this these slides, I just felt myself like, I don't know, just shaking in my seat. It's a long movie. It's very tedious. At times it's straight up disgusting. But the giddiness that I had throughout it, even if it was 3 hours longer, it would just keep growing and growing and growing. Honestly though, and I said this, parts of this movie are just straight up funny. And the oyster dinner scene, that whole extended sequence from when they start serving the stuff to the next morning, is maybe the funniest thing in any movie. Oh my god, dude, just thinking of just the performances, the when they're bantering back and forth and throwing quotes at each other, and just everybody vomiting, and oh man, beautiful. Okay, I gotta calm down. We got one more movie. Probably not a lot of people would guess this. It's Drive My Car by Hamaguchi, Ryusuke Hamaguchi. The reason probably a lot of people wouldn't guess this is because it came out last year. It's not in any way, shape, or form actually a 2022 movie, but it started playing in Canadian theaters in 2022, and I saw it in 2022, and it was by far my favorite thing I've seen this year, and it radically, irreversibly changed my life. At least I feel like it has, and I'm going to include it at number one because it's my list, and I get to cheat if I want to. I saw it twice in theaters, and then one time on an airplane, and every time I watched it, I cried very, very hard at certain scenes around the end, especially. And then a bunch of times I would rewatch specific scenes, or maybe just like an hour of it in general. And also I would usually cry a lot. During the plane viewing, because, it was the third time I'd seen it, and I was just on a plane. So on my phone, I wrote 3,600 words about it. And this was supposed to be the basis of a video review of it. And I was really excited and motivated to make this because there was just a lot of things I had to say about this, and I articulated them as best as I could, and I felt like I had the foundation of hopefully a video that would end up longer than Drive My Car itself. I thought that was like a good goal to see if I could talk about this movie for longer than its 3.5 hour runtime. But that never materialized. I just was very busy after that trip and throughout the whole summer, and never got to it, never really returned to those notes, never started making slides, whatever. Basically, it was going to cover a lot of stuff. General praise in the movie, first off. I just think it's amazingly shot, amazingly performed. So many little things, little thematic links, lines of dialogue, just so many things I just wanted to praise that I thought these need to be highlighted specifically as well done. I wanted to talk about why this movie changed my life so much, what I felt like it taught me, and how I applied that to make some like really radical changes in my life. It was going to, get pretty personal in kind of covering that. I wanted to talk about, how good the performances were. I wanted to talk about the staggered level of textuality and the structure that we have, plays within a plays, and then seeing the characters learn to perform the parts in the eventual play. And then the idea of like one of the characters is a writer, she writes stories, but then they tell the stories out loud. And I found that was really fascinating because a lot of this is adapted from Haruki Murakami short stories, and how in the short stories, all of this would exist on the same like level of textuality, that there's no functional difference between being told a story and seeing characters perform a story, between seeing a play performed in a movie and just watching the movie. So I just thought that was very interesting. And just in general, I just wanted to talk about how this movie both like really hit me on a deep emotional level, and also like really motivated me to think about the craft of cinema and why I thought it was so well done. And also just kind of sparked like all sorts of like intellectual ideas in my head about like all sorts of things, language and Chekhov and morality, and so I don't know, I wanted to talk about that whole spectrum in this movie. The idea of the actors having this aura of attractiveness that makes it hit emotionally harder. I find both of the male leads in this movie like incredibly attractive. and there were certain scenes where when I was watching it, I was, like crying and so moved and so emotionally gripped. And it was kind of like after the spell had worn off, I was thinking about the actual content of those scenes. And I'm like, yeah, that was really good, but like, why was it so compelling? And I realized that it is this kind of like attractiveness halo effect. And this has been very extensively psychologically studied, that if you think someone is attractive, you're going to listen more to what they're saying. It's going to feel like more real and true to you. So I wanted to examine that phenomenon in the context of this movie. It seemed like a really good time to discuss that and discuss, like, is that okay? Is that an okay way to digest media? Is it not just kind of like a strict positive, but then it makes you biased? Whatever. I wanted to talk about this idea of the redemptive power of suffering your whole life, which of course is very, very key to the Chekhov play they're performing and the lives of the actual characters. And then of course in my own life, I've often thought things like that, like I don't know. And then thinking much of this is religiously grounded in Chekhov, and then this movie makes it very ambiguous how these characters are supposed to reckon with this secularly. And then, you know, in my own life, I'm not a believing person, I'm not a religious person. So what am I to make of a religious message that if you suffer your whole life, at the gates of heaven, God will have seen your hard work, and then you can relax? What does that mean? And what does it mean to suffer unto distraction, which is by far the most powerful line of the whole movie to me, when the main character admits that he was suffering to the point of distraction, and how he feels about how he behaved now and what he would have done differently. And how does that apply to me? What sort of life do I actually want to live? What is a beautiful life? For so long I kept saying, oh, I want to live a beautiful life. I would watch Sangatsu no Lion and I would say, that's a beautiful life. but what the heck did I mean? What did I want for myself? What does it mean to show mercy to myself? So a lot of these questions, I don't have good answers. I just kind of took actions, having been inspired to think about them. And now my life is like 500 times better than it was at the start of 2022. Estimated, roughly. And, you know, it's not perfect, but roughly 500 times better. And to be honest, I don't want to try to answer these questions now. It doesn't really matter right now. I don't really need to know. I can just kind of exist and be happy. So, I don't know. That's it. I'm not going to talk about it much more. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. But good movie, though. Good movie. But, it's really amazing how different my life is now. So yeah, good list of movies. Looking forward to hopefully staying this invested in movies in 2023. Maybe not quite as invested. A lot of it was just like the thrill and novelty of being able to go see kind of art films in theaters and stuff. But I don't want to go back to zero either. I want to still see a lot of movies. I love seeing movies. Yeah, I don't know. I think I had like an outro plans, but I don't remember what it was. I got kind of caught up thinking about driving my car. So we'll call it there. Good talking. Please look forward to several anime videos that will surely be even longer. Bye bye.